Located about 15 minutes west of Denver in Golden, the Colorado Railroad Museum, often referred to as the Train Museum, is a mostly outdoor museum that's been open for about 60 years, and it's a big hit with kids. And let's be real, some adults are into trains too. And you could ride a full-size train here too, but not year-round. We'll get into those schedules and some of the unpredictable things because this is not your typical museum. In this video, I'll include a bunch of clips so that you'll know what to expect, and I'll also share some tips that'll help you feel like a local on your first visit. I've been here way too many times with our 3-year-old, so let's do this. Okay, first things first, this is primarily an outdoor museum, so check the weather and plan accordingly. You're going to be outside for about 90% of the time that you're here, exploring the rail yard, going in and out of trains, walking through dirt and gravel. Choose the right shoes. Most of the area isn't paved, and it can get pretty muddy if it's rained or snowed recently. Your toddler might not care, but you might care if you're wearing your Jordans or your work shoes and you thought you were going to be inside the whole time. This is a pretty hands-on type of museum that you're going to explore on your own. So you'll walk around the grounds, explore a few trains, and of course, snap some pictures next to some huge trains. In general, this is not the type of museum where you look at some signs, read things, and learn stuff. This is a place where you look at some big-ass trains outside. I needed to mention this outdoor part because the first time my family went here, it was winter, and we all expected to be inside a lot more than we were. I realize that this can be a little trickier if you're traveling, but especially if you're visiting with younger kids, I would recommend bringing some quarters to the museum. You'll only need a couple dollars worth in quarters. This is not like Dave & Buster's where you're gonna drop like 25 bucks. The reason why you need these quarters is that there's a really impressive model train set downstairs that, you guessed it, runs on quarters. A lot of families don't know about the train set and the quarters, so if you come prepared, you can give them a few quarters and feel like a hero for the day. If you spend some time down there, you'll see that there are some pretty funny Easter eggs that are hidden throughout the scenery. Because adults built this thing, they put in some pretty funny Where's Waldo-like jokes in the mountains, by the tracks, and in the towns. The more time you spend down there, the more funny things you'll see. I notice something new pretty much every time I'm down there, while our son spends maybe $1 or $2 in quarters to make the trains run. You can use the quarters to start the amusement park, run the trains, and bring various parts of the scenery to life. If you're an adult, you can get away with spending less than $1 in quarters here, but, you know, kids like to do things a few times. It's not well publicized, but one of the coolest things you can do at the museum is operate the railway turntable, also known as a wheelhouse. Most people who come here for the first time do not know about this, and this is something that's fun to do with older kids, a family, or a group of friends. These turntables are still in use today to turn the trains around, and if you're into like physics or simple machines or something, it's pretty incredible. This is just not something you do every day, which makes it pretty memorable. If you head down to where the active locomotives are, there's usually someone who's working on the trains there. That's where you'll find the turntable. If you ask nicely, they'll let you turn it yourself, which feels like you're pushing like a football sled or the heaviest cart you've ever gotten at Costco in the beginning. But once you get it going and start to pick up speed, you'll be really impressed at how easy it is to turn this thing around when it literally moves tons and tons of weight at a time. So especially if you're coming to the museum with your family or a group of friends, this is just a really fun thing to all do together. Okay, now let's talk about train rides and the schedule, which sounds complicated, but it's not that complicated. As long as weather allows, from January to roughly Labor Day, train rides happen on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. There's a very small fee to ride the train, but nothing you'd complain about. October, November, and December are generally not regular train ride months. They do special trains, like a Thomas the Train thing and a holiday train thing, but these are pretty expensive. They list the schedules and prices on their website. I'll link to that on the screen if you want to check it out. Personally, I think that there are better holiday trains in the Denver area, especially one in Georgetown that I made a whole video on. I'll link to that in the description as well. If you're visiting during the summer months, which is a great time to visit the Denver area, the train runs on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, which makes it a little easier on your schedule. So if you want to get the most out of your trip to the museum and do that train ride, just plan ahead depending on when you're coming to visit so that you can avoid some potential disappointment. This one can be pretty hit or miss in terms of schedules because there are some human factors involved here. There's a really impressive outdoor garden railroad that's at the museum that's maintained by a local organization. It's an impressive outdoor model train that's really cool and honestly very relaxing to look at, but it's not running all the time because someone from the organization has to be there to run their trains on it. In general, I found that coming in the late spring or the summertime on a nice weather day is the best way to see these trains running because, that's when someone would want to be outside showing off their trains for people to look at. While the garden itself is nice to look at on its own, it's just more interesting when you're seeing the trains go over bridges and through tunnels and through the different towns. It's really nice when it's running. If you have small kids, you might be shocked at just how long they will spend watching these model trains go around and around on the tracks. It's also nice because there are some benches around the garden, so it's one of the few areas where you can take a seat and relax, especially if kids are just watching the trains go around forever. There's so much variance on the schedule here, but when the trains are running, it can really add to your visit. Also, if you're doing a family trip and you want kids to get a little bit more out of their visit, they do special events with like story time, pop-up exhibits, and things like that. You can check out their website. They have things running pretty much all the time. While you can totally come to the museum and just wander on your own, which is typically what we do, especially if you visit in the spring or the summertime, you can make more of a day of it and, your kids can learn something instead of you just saying like, I don't know, or making up something whenever they ask you a question. Since you're probably planning a trip to Denver, I'll add a bunch of videos on the screen that will really help you plan your trip. I'll catch you over there on those videos, and if you end up visiting the Railroad Museum, I hope that these tips help you have an awesome time.